hearing from Navin and Manuel. It's great, isn't it, to be able to interact with the NHS. So one thing that our clients ask of us all the time, how do I integrate with the NHS systems? And if you want to know, it's all, a lot of it is behind now the API platform. So we'd love to invite you up to speak about what's happening in that world and how you're making it easier for us to integrate with yourselves.
We'll try. Really should have gone before Cleveland because it's kind of going to take a bit of a dive. So because of everything that Cleveland said, I need to say something contentious just to get everybody's attention and away from that QR code, which is very important, but let's get away from that for a second. So integration, interoperability in healthcare is shockingly hard. I think everybody can see people nodding already on that. I've been in rooms for the last 2.5 decades where the word interoperability gets mentioned and it's not a solved problem. So what Navin and I wanted to do today is talk to you as a group about the things that NHS England is doing to hopefully remove the shockingly part of hard and just make it hard. So what we're going to talk through today, I'm going to just basically introduce the API platform itself. Navin is going to talk you to about the actual details of what that platform looks like. As I said, we're taking a bit of a dive from Cleveland, sorry. And then we'll come back and I want to talk to you about something called the digital onboarding service, which is a critical part, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So why is it shockingly hard? It kind of goes back to some of the things that Lauren was talking about. And when she was talking about kind of that, making that case for change, it's hard technically. It's not as hard technically as it was maybe 20 years ago, because now there are standards. We talked earlier about things like open API standards. I think that came up when Richard was talking about data standards. These standards now exist in industry, not just in healthcare, but they exist in industry. And they are common standards. They're used in open banking, they're used in other services. So the healthcare is starting to adopt these things. But it's also hard from a product perspective. Some of you will represent organizations, EMIS, for example, and EMIS Web, TPP, System 1, Cerner, Epic, and the myriad of other products that are out there. It's hard from, well, where does integration fit in my product? Where does it fit in what I'm wanting to do for my customers? It's hard from a clinical perspective. It's hard. How do we represent allergies? How do we represent medical records? And obviously it's hard from a safety perspective and from an information governance perspective. And all these things just make it hard, and that's real. And I think it was Lauren said the words which really echoed with me is, it's hard to make the case for change. So what we're trying to do at NHS England is make that a little bit easier. So what's our mission? It's the only slide I will read to you, I promise. So what we're trying to do is make integration easier for everyone, external and internal, with a one-stop API platform, modern, industry best practice, and value for money, and make it world-class. That's what we're trying to do. That is our objective, that is our vision, and that is what we drive towards every single day. We're trying to create that exemplar. We're trying to create that exemplar for NHS England and England. We're trying to create it for the broader countries around the UK, but we also work with some other countries as well. So, for example, Navin recently met with Germany, the German Health Authority, to talk about what we're doing here with the API platform. And equally, we've made the offer to other countries as well and their health services. So, click. Again, I'm not going to read a slide, but what does easier actually mean? It's very easy for me to say we're going to make it easy. Well, what does easier actually mean? We need to make learning easier. We need to make it easier for our engineers and architects and technologists to be able to understand the technical specifications. We need to make it easier for them to be able to design and build those APIs by using those common standards. I'm not going to reel off a whole load of technical acronyms right now, but those things, as I mentioned earlier, these things now exist in industry. So let's adopt and use those common standards. But also let's adopt and use the emerging and established clinical standards. So things like SNOMED coding, things like FHIR standards. And I will immediately kind of step back from FHIR and say, look, that is still an emerging standard. There is still work to be done there. We need to make testing easier. We need to provide you folks with testing environments. We need to provide you with test data. We need to allow engineers to be able to onboard their systems and as they're developing, give them the necessary tools to be able to run sandpits and be able to connect to things without having to sign 47 forms in triplicate and go through however many Excel spreadsheets. We need to get to the point where you folks can largely self-serve. That's our objective. We're not there yet, and I'll talk a little bit about digital onboarding later, but that is our objective, is that you folks can largely self-serve. We need to be able to make health and support easier, and that's not running a support desk. That is you folks having the tools to be able to help one another. Create communities. You will see this around, for example, say, for example, the Google API ecosystem. It's near as, damn it, impossible to get in touch with Google and say, can you give me some support on how your API for your maps works? There's a whole community of people around that help one another. We want to create that. But equally, we also want to create channels to allow you to come to NHS England to be able to get support directly from us when you need it and when it's appropriate to do so. So that's kind of the principles that we're working to. So everything that NHS England is doing right now in the APIM programme is guided by that mission, and it's guided by those principles. And I wanted to do this before I started talking, but I'd be interested to see just a show of hands in the room is how many people have heard of the API programme? That's a fair amount. How many of you are engaged with it in one way or another? Interesting, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so they'd be interested in the next question. How many of you are actually running production healthcare services right now using the API program? 3. Hopefully, I can come back, and Navin and I can come back next year, and there will be a lot more than 3, because that will tell us that we got our job right. So now I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Navin, who is the product owner for the platform itself.
Thank you.
There you go. Just you need that.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Navin Bose, and I am the product owner for the API platform. So I've been with the NHS for over 10 years now. And just to connect to what happened? Just to connect to what Richard was saying about the Shield patient list and how that came about. At that point in time, I was working as the product owner for the HES data, and I could feel the pain of the tap on the shoulder comes in from the from the Prime Minister's office asking us to create that list. The first question is, where's the HES data? And there's a sudden rush from everybody in the organization say, but I need the HES data now. I want it on a platform or on a database that I can access it. So, and doing that, I think it just shows that at that point in time, there wasn't enough interoperability or availability of assets. So over the 10 years, I've worked with lots of silos of assets where they are sat in a database or an Oracle database somewhere, and it's a nightmare to access them. So why I'm saying all of this is because over the last year and a half, I've been the product owner for the API platform, and the NHS England API platform over the last 3 years has done amazing things. They started from scratch, building a really secure platform for everybody who wants to build healthcare data software to use the API to access the back-end enormous amount of healthcare data that's available out there. And what we did from an approach perspective is to sort of look at what we needed, and we wanted to build a platform initially first, and then look at building a platform is just not going to help people come in. We needed to make it available for people to see what was needed from an exemplar API perspective. And that was built in the initial stages, well before my time, by really intelligent people, brilliant people who built the PDS Fire API. And that was really, really, really an exemplar set of API. And that allowed anyone with the right use case to access back-end patient demographic information really quickly through a really robust API. The other sort of objectives that we had was to, we found that there were other APIs within internal NHS England teams and external teams who were working in their own silos, and we wanted to make sure that we can reach out to those guys and tell them, listen, we've got a robust platform up here. Bring your APIs. We'll help you integrate it onto our platform. Initially, when we started off, the service, it was the general feedback that we had from people was it's difficult. There's lots of tech involved. The API community or API producer teams were not technically sort of mature enough to start building APIs out of the scratch. So we learned that providing a robust amount of information out there, open source data, exemplar APIs, test data, was really going to help them build and get onto the platform. Once we delivered the MVP for the platform, we felt that the feedback has gone up to about a 3 out of 5, and since then it's been a constant sort of effort to iterate every little aspect, so every component of our platform, to make sure that we can make it easy for integration purposes, enhance the functionality and features that were available on our platform for API producer teams to use. So this diagram over here illustrates what our platform is. So basically, we are the box in the middle, and on the left-hand side, we've got the healthcare workers who use the applications to access certain information, which is sat at the back end on the right-hand side, and we've got patient information through the applications who can access that. So they are basically the consumers. Left-hand side, you've got the consumers, and on the right-hand side, we've got the producers of the data. Internal, could be third party, and also the NHS England assets that are sat at the back. What our role is to provide a robust platform in the middle that connects them together. It's like, for example, Amazon. You buy stuff from Amazon. This is for people who are not familiar with APIs. You buy things from Amazon. What does Amazon do as a platform? It connects manufacturers of those products with consumers who want to consume those products. Same like Uber out there. They connect the drivers with the users who want, passengers who want to use the service. Just like that, as a platform, that's what we wanted to do. We wanted to make it easy for people who want to consume services and data from NHS England to access that platform really quickly on the right use case. So the three main sort of components that we have on our platform is the hosting platform, obviously, which is the core of it, the developer hub, including the onboarding service, which Manuel will touch on later on, and the API producer zone, which is the wealth of knowledge and resources, both technical and non-technical, for API producer teams and consumers to learn from and use to onboard onto our platform. What is the API gateway? So from an application perspective, it is basically an end user calling application which connects to creates a proxy, connects through to our gateway, and then we make sure that it's the right person connecting at the right use cases and making sure it connects to the back end and retrieve the information that they need for direct patient care. What we have done is we have made sure that the platform runs on one of the best sort of API management solution out there. There are lots of organizations that provide the solution, but we have found that Gartner has recommended that it is Google Apigee is the best sort of management solution out there. Over the last sort of 3 years, we've done a lot of integration to make sure that the Google Apigee sort of system integrates with all our other multi-cloud services that we have. We've got AWS containers, we've got Azure DevOps that sort of supports our infrastructure. We've made sure that it's internet facing, and we've made sure that it is of modern standards. And what we wanted to make sure that was that the experience that the users, like API producers and consumers, when they start using our platform, it is easy for them. It is effortless in some areas. Where they hit difficulties, we want to make sure they have a consistent experience from a support perspective. And again, self-service, as Manuel said, it is not easy to provide a self-service. It depends on the maturity of the teams and the type of services that they want, to make sure that we can give them enough environments for them to test their APIs quite quickly. And I think if anybody is interested and they want to try and look at building an API, the NHS England API Platform is the place to go. You can, within half an hour, set up your account, start testing your use cases, build your APIs, build your open spec in about half an hour to an hour. But with very little knowledge, and if there's anything that you need, we've got a huge wealth of knowledge and resource that's available online, and it's all open source. So we're not hiding anything. It's available for anybody to use, adapt, tweak. I wanted to touch on API security, but I'm going to skip it. Basically, it's critical. And what we want to make sure is that we have made sure that our platform is able to provide a security pattern for all types of APIs, so not just user restricted or application restricted. We want to make sure that it's available for individual use cases where our platform is not a constraint for them and it can adapt to different sort of security patterns. The other functionality we have is the amazing sort of plug and play capabilities for monitoring and alerting. So we've got Grafana, we've got Splunk logs, which keep track of every sort of transaction goes. It's live, it's real time. We make sure that the calling application is accessing the right sort of backend for the right purpose and retrieving the right data. So we do a lot of that, and we've got other tools that I probably won't go into, but rate limiting is one of them, where we stop. We want to make sure that any sort of access or restrict to our backend is not exploited in any way, and we've got rate limits set on as a default on our platform. One of the other things that I wanted to touch on is what we've built in the last sort of 6 months. We found that majority of API producer teams were struggling with the tech involved. For example, knowledge of Apigee, knowledge of Azure DevOps, knowledge of AWS components, AWS containers, and things like that. We built a proxy generator API, and we call it Proxygen. I think we should patent it, but the proxy generator API is a fantastic sort of tool that we have created for generating a proxy in hours rather than weeks it used to take. It's a tool that would generate a proxy on our platform within a few clicks, a couple of API calls, just using your Open API spec. And the Open API spec, for most of you, if you don't know, is the core of the API. So it lists out what the API needs to do, what the configs are, and all the details that is necessary for it to reach out and create a proxy. And we have done that, and we've made it available. So the difference is that the current process used to take weeks and months in some cases. The new process takes days for them to get access. And what we want to do as a success criteria to make sure that that is the default way where API producers can build proxies onto a system. We want to make sure it's going to reduce sort of costs by 50%. It will reduce effort or support from our side by about 50%. Yeah, and associated costs by about 50%. That's another tool. The other place for new API consumers and producers to go to on our platform is the API integration catalog. So they've already got APIs on there. It's already got all the specs on there. So if you're trying to think of building services that are going to use NHS systems, this is the place to go to and see what's out there, and then you can try and access it. Everything that you need for building an API can be found within those specs. So we put everything in there, including the technology, the business functions of what the API is doing, the status of it, all the technologies, all including, in some cases, the Postman files in there. So it's just there for you to use. What we haven't talked about is exploiting the capabilities of AI that's coming in, generative AI. And I was at a Google event a couple of months ago, and they are looking at a Duet AI, which would create an open API spec for you just by writing a few lines. Just like you say, I want an API that would do X, Y, and Z, and there you go. Within seconds, the Bose the main the spec of the API is generated for you to tweak. Once you have that, use Proxygen, you're on our system quite quickly. The other thing I talked about, I won't go into again, is the wealth of knowledge that's out there in our producer zone documentation and sort of amazing checklist. I just want to close off by saying what's the wider sort of benefit that the API platform is going to provide to NHS systems, and I think is detailed on the slide, and it says API producers and consumers get useful integrated software to market quicker. They don't have to worry about building a platform, using a platform. They can get onto a system really quickly and start exploiting and building services and products that would benefit the end users, the citizens, or the patient at the end. Low barrier to entry, and healthcare workers in particular have got a wide variety of well-integrated software for them to choose from. And this is the key, to make sure that we have the patient at the heart of what we are doing, to make sure that everything that we do from a service provision, platform provision, is directly benefiting the patients in the end. I think that was the last slide, so I'm going to hand you over back to Manuel. Thank you.
Thank you. So you heard me introduce what the API program is, and Navin talked to you about what the platform is, how we work with those producers, how we work with consumers. But what is it in the real world? And this is the bit where I have to go to my notes and not look at you, but look at here, because this is correct as of about 4:45 yesterday, I think. So right now we are working with 871 different organisations across healthcare in England. That represents 1,041 integrated products. We currently have 1,740 integrations in progress. And as an example, just to break that down a little bit, 467 of those are organisations and products that are integrating with PDS. 253 of them are integrating with NHS Login. 206 are integrating with Mesh, and 117 are integrating with the NHS app. That's just the top 4. Within that, there are a whole load more. So it's real. It exists. There is investment, central investment on building this platform, building everything that Navin talked about. And that's really important because it's real. Now, I know a number of people in the room, and most of you will know that I've been in and around healthcare integration for quite a long time. And I'm kind of poacher turned gamekeeper to some extent. I used to work with Cleveland at EMIS in the early days of spine and external interface specifications and MIMS and spreadsheets and assurance processes and all of those kinds of things. And if I kind of take my working hats off, I can see a key difference in the way that NHS England is approaching this. Whereas previously it was like, well, let's just build some APIs. Let's create, some of you might kind of reel at things like ITK and the old services that were delivered. The difference this time round is around onboarding. Is we want the platform to be as consistent and as stable and as usable and as accessible as it possibly can be. We need it to be modern, but we need you to be able to integrate with it. And the only way that we can achieve that is we can't go down the route of build it and they will come, which has been said before. We need to make the onboarding process as effective and as efficient as possible. Navin, you talked about barrier to entry. We need to drop those barriers. Yes, assurance is important, but onboarding is not assurance. Assurance is a very small part of that, and we need to be able to streamline that assurance process. So all our focus, not all, the majority of our focus goes on building that digital onboarding experience. And you saw some of that when Navin was talking there about the integration catalog and having that publicly facing website. You can all access that today. That gives you the information of the APIs that are available to you. So how do we think about that onboarding service? Well, partly, I'm an engineer, I'm an architect, I'm a technologist, so one of the really important things for me, again, coming back from the EMIS world, was getting the engineer experience right. Giving the engineers, the technical communities, the ability to be able to consume, I don't want to say documents, because it's not documents, it's not the 50, 60-page Word document that you've got to read through. It's about giving them the right specifications for those APIs so that they can understand them, as you were saying, so they can onboard themselves in a matter of hours into test environments, rather than having to go through many, many hoops to be able to get that far. We need to be really pragmatic around that balance of consumer, which you all represent to an extent, and risk. Because there is risk. We could need to think about kind of information governance and privacy flows, all those kinds of things. But we need to balance that. We need to be far more pragmatic about that and how we do that. We need to keep those consumer communities engaged. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about the sort of things that we do there, but that engagement, I mentioned it when I was talking earlier about communities that build up around these APIs that help one another, and NHS England being engaged with that. We need that alignment to industry standard, and I deliberately put industry standard in quotes because the people I work with quite frequently quote me as industry standard doesn't exist. We all have industry interpretations of standards. So we need to understand what your standards are, the kind of things that you're working with. If you take, say, for example, some of the technical standards around Open API and OAS specifications and lots of acronyms here, what kind of things do you need from us? What are the standards that you need from us? We don't want to impose those on you. This is how it works. Come to us, tell us what you need. We want to be able to adopt those things. And as I mentioned earlier, we need that platform and those API services to be stable. So we need to balance innovation and stability. We don't want to be changing APIs all the time. We don't want to be uplifting to FHIR version 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, 10, and then pulling the rug out of APIs. And we want to manage that backwards compatibility with the consumer communities. So that's really important. And all of that kind of goes towards making effective onboarding. So what is the developer hub? Every single one of you today could go home. You probably don't want to do it tonight. It's a work thing. You could go home and you can register for a developer account. There are no barriers at all to that. Some of you most likely already have, especially those that have already engaged with the APM program in some way or another, but you can register that. That will give you access, as Navin was saying, to be able to start creating sample environments, start to look at specifications, start to engage with the communities that are already there, that we'd love to see far more engagement with. So what you've got there, so you've got things like getting started and tutorials. So just things that product owners, not just technologists, but product owners and product managers can read to understand, well, how can I use these APIs? I want to be able to surface medical record information in my product. How could I do that? Oh, well, I need to be able to do this, that, and that. So we're trying to present that information, not just in this is the atomic kind of view of an API and lots of technical stuff around it, is what does that API mean in healthcare? How can that be used at frontline? How can that be used at point of care? So that information is there. But we need feedback from you folks as to how good it is. Equally, the API catalog that Navin talked about, and through that, you can get to API specifications, which your technologists are going to love, hopefully. And then into the developer accounts itself, you get into self-service test environments, you get into the digital onboarding process. Those of you that have been around it long enough, when I say the words assurance, you will shudder. It's not that. And we're trying to get away from that heavyweight assurance, as I mentioned at the very beginning, get towards self-service as much as we possibly can. And then obviously the developer communities at the end of it, as I can keep referring to. So I was going to say, I'll stop there, take a picture, but we'll share these slides if we can. But as I say, you can register for a developer account. You've got the developer communities. You've got our innovation service as well. So the NHS Innovation Service. This is a key pipeline to us because we get inputs and feedback from the communities, from the consumer communities and the producer communities, but we also get inputs through from the innovation service, the NHS Innovation Service. That's really key to us as well. Really, really important, if more than anything else, is feedback. Is our service working for you? This is not a build it and they will come. It's build it and make sure that we've given you the right tools and the right pipelines and the right things that you need to be able to actually start to adopt those APIs. That's really important, because if we get that wrong, then the API program will wither, to be completely honest, and we don't want that, clearly don't want that to happen. And then also we expose our roadmaps and our feature backlogs. So vote on things. I'd really like to see that. Click, tick. Tell us what you need. This isn't NHS England building APIs for the sake of NHS England. This is NHS England building APIs for the sake of the patients that are sat at the point of care, receiving care from clinicians that you folks all provide products for. And that is the API program.
Can I just add, It's completely free.
Oh, that.
I forgot to mention that. It's completely free to anybody who wants to use it. It's not going to cost you anything to integrate onto our platform. So come and use it. There's nothing stopping you guys. Thank you.
I might like to be paid in donuts. Just saying. But yeah, and there you go. Thank you very much.